Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We'll be starting in just a moment. Hello, my name is Debbie Stefaniak. I'm from the marketing team here at Kermi Software. Welcome to our webinar entitled Workplace Collaboration Trends and the Value of UC Management. Our webinar is co-presented by Erwin Lazar, President and Principal Analyst at Metrigy, and Bruno Girardel, Head of Product Management at Kermi Software. Today's webinar includes insights from Metrigy's recent Workplace Collaboration MetriCast global research study and discusses the real-world benefits of adopting admin tools to simplify the day-to-day management of enterprise unified communications. This will be followed by a Q&A session to close the webinar, so be sure to submit your questions using the questions option at the bottom of the live storm platform. So let's get started. I'd like to invite Erwin and Bruno to tell us a little bit about their companies and kick us off.
Great. So I'll go ahead and start. Thank you so much. And excited to be here, excited to speak to everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Erwin Lazar, President and Principal Analyst with a company called Metrigy. And just to briefly introduce Metrigy, we spend our time going out to IT leaders responsible for communication and collaboration, both internally and customer facing, and gather data on what they're doing and why and where they're spending their money and what challenges they're having, which technologies they're adopting. And we try and distill out of that what are the characteristics of successful companies. So as we go through the webinar, I'll share some of the data that we've seen with respect to UC management and what successful companies are doing differently. And as we think about what that means, we'll talk about our definitions of success in terms of ROI and improved management or improved response to problems that do occur.
All right, so my turn. Hi, I'm Bruno Girardel. I'm Head of Product at Kermi Software. So it's really my pleasure and really excited to be with you also today. So a quick word regarding Kermi. So we deliver a solution in order to really simplify and automate the way to manage and administrate UC and CC platform. So really that's all about provisioning day-to-day management, users onboarding, offboarding, migration capabilities, etc. And the really important fact is that we provide a unique solution that is really available to manage simultaneously Avaya, Cisco, Microsoft, and much more. We are really a multi-vendor solutions. So we are, of course, a global presence worldwide with customer in more than 20 countries, and we have won some awards. And something super important is that we have really strong partnership with all those techno vendors, Avaya, Cisco, and Microsoft, with the different program. As an example, in Cisco, we are the GPL. For Microsoft, we are gold partner, and with Avaya.
So let's go ahead and spend a couple of minutes talking about how the UC landscape is changing and what are some of the challenges that organizations are facing as we've entered this new world of hybrid work, distributed work, virtual work, and multi-vendor communications. So I want to start by sharing some of our research. This comes from a global study that we conducted of almost 400 companies, in which we talked to the folks who are responsible for communication and collaboration, purchasing and operations within their organization. And the first area we wanted to dig into is what's happening from a perspective of where are those people that you need to support. So we saw in the early days of the pandemic, I guess 2020 now, almost 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, I should say, that most companies sent everyone home and they went to remote work as the new normal. What we have seen over the last, I'd say 6 months to a year now is a desire to implement some level of flexibility. For some companies, that's giving employees the choice. You can see about 24% of companies that say, you know what, we're going to let you decide where you want to work. About 38%, it really depends on the job. So if you're a first responder, a teacher, mechanic, some kind of position where you really can't work remotely, then you may be in the office. But for other roles within a company, so back office, for example, they might let those people work from home. About 15% said, you know what, everybody's work from home now. We found it works. We don't really need the office space. So we'll let people work remote. And about 21% that are trying to bring people back to the office. This is probably the one area that's in the greatest state of flux right now as companies try and figure out what they're doing from a go forward perspective.
Yes, Erin, I'm fully agree with you, and this is also the feedback that we have from our current customers. We've seen that they are customizing our product in order to create that kind of profile, such as remote and office and hybrid. And regarding new opportunities we are working on, this is exactly the same. We now always have questions about our ability to manage hybrid users, and of course, our answer is yes.
Yes, that makes sense that you have to have a solution that supports people wherever they're working, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we asked participants, and again, these are people responsible for operating or procuring collaboration communication solutions within the organization. What challenges are you facing? And there were kind of two groups that emerged out of this. The first is network related and performance related. So ensuring that people can connect to the applications that they need, regardless of where they're working, overcoming still limitations of home networking, whether that's Wi-Fi or internet connectivity, congestion. We certainly saw a lot more of this earlier in the pandemic when people were multiple people working from home, students in classes at home at the same time, everybody using video. But more importantly, and I'd say growing faster, are the issues related to ensuring that people are able to feel like they're part of an organization and that their technology is not getting in the way of them doing their work. So if they need assistance, if they need to reset a password, if they want to configure some kind of feature, if they want to ensure that they can most easily communicate and collaborate with the people that they work with, you want to ensure that you're delivering frictionless capabilities to those individuals. So also factors related to security, making sure that people have a growing number of types of devices that we've seen at home, higher quality webcams, even desktop phones in some cases. Headsets are certainly a very popular option for remote workers. As well as just overall performance of voice quality, video quality are all factors that IT leaders look at when they try and figure out, how do I deliver an effective hybrid work strategy? Bruno, any thoughts?
No, I'm fully agree with you on that slide. So that's fine for me.
Excellent. Okay. So I mentioned, that growing array of endpoints has really been one that has, I'd say, changed the provisioning. If you go back pre-pandemic, most people who were working in an office had a desktop phone. They probably, were using a built-in camera if they were using video at all. Video has certainly exploded in the last couple of years. But now we're seeing that video has become a primary, if not the primary, I should say, way that people communicate and collaborate. So we are seeing that organizations are investing in provisioning more cameras and video conferencing systems into their office space. Over half of our participants are increasing the deployment of video conferencing, including about a little over a third that are making sure that they've got video endpoints now in every location. So they have to provision licenses and devices and maintain inventory and be able to support those systems when people run into, unfortunately, likely problems or they do, run into challenges getting video conferences up and running. We've seen an explosion in personal video endpoints, higher quality webcams and bars and integrated audio, even integrated all-in-one devices with screens built in. I mentioned headsets. We see that there's a lot of push to improve that quality of experience, again, overcome some of those challenges we talked about earlier. Phones certainly aren't dead. There's been a lot of, the epitaph for phones has been written for a number of years, yet our data, and I think the data that we've seen from the vendors themselves shows that phone sales continue to increase. And there is a preference in many cases for a dedicated desktop phone device. especially in contact center and common areas and so on. And then I mentioned headsets are continuing to explode. So we see that if you're thinking about what should that remote work environment look like, that's going to be video centric, having that high quality audio device. And also when people are back in the office, if they're sitting at their desk, that they have a higher quality audio experience coupled with video. So the next area that we looked at was the trend in communications platforms. And so, as Bruno mentioned, one of the strengths of Kermi is that ability to support multi-vendor environments. We have seen that exploding as companies move to the cloud, and often they're not moving to a single vendor in the cloud, and often they're continuing to need to support some level of on-prem solutions. But what we have found is the cloud has become the most popular means of delivering communication services within the organization. So looking at calling specifically, we found just over a third that predominantly use a cloud service. This still varies quite a bit by the kind of organization. So smaller companies a little more heavily in the cloud, larger companies still either custom private cloud hosted solutions, as we call them, or still having a measure of on-prem. And you can see that's still about 29% in our study. Again, this was about 400 companies in North America, Western Europe, Australia, Southeast Asia. We're still on-prem, and this would have been at the end of 2021, with plans to move to cloud. About 25% of that on-prem group was moving to cloud by the end of last year, and about 14% that was evaluating a move this year. So overall, if you look at just that group that's either pure cloud or cloud still with on-prem, it's almost half of the market. So this has been a big change, and it's been a challenge for organizations that want to successfully move to cloud to be able to do so with minimizing disruption, and to be able to port phone numbers and devices and reconfigure all the different bells and whistles that they need to configure to get this up and running as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah, you're right, Erin, and I think that this is very, very impressive to see how the pandemic has accelerated the migration to the cloud, and now we really have a cloud-first world. However, we are seeing at Kermi customers looking for a way to keep their full on-prem architecture and/or with an hybrid approach, maybe for regulation purposes, to protect the investment, etc. But in any case, full on-prem, full cloud, hybrid, or on a migration path, the management tools are more than ever a key component of a UC and CC solution. But I think, Erwin, you will detail it in a minute.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important, that if somebody does call with an issue into a help desk, that the help desk person shouldn't have to spend a lot of time asking that person about what phone system they're on. They should be able to look up that individual and see, at their fingertips, here's how it's configured, here's the phone number assigned and devices and so on, right? Okay. So let's talk about the requirements to effectively manage unified communications and the value of UC management in the workplace collaboration area. So we define, I know there's a lot of different architectures out there. We certainly look at ITIL as one, but we look at 4 kind of core areas that people are typically investing in when they're trying to establish a strategy for UC management. So the first is managing the endpoints. So I talked about voice and video endpoints, even out to headsets, to ensure that they know what's being provisioned, that they can update firmware and software for those devices, that they can easily tie provisioning into an IT service management platform. So if somebody calls and they're having problems with voice quality, the help desk person can see what's been sent out to that person and what the health is of that device potentially. They're looking at security, so they're ensuring that devices are provisioned and accounts are provisioned in such a way that people only have access to what they need to access. Also, that you can prevent against common attacks, toll fraud, SIP registration, and so on. So we see a lot of interest in security. As an area we'll talk a little bit more detail about is administration, and that's that provisioning of phone numbers, of users, of accounts. Again, trying to automate that as much as possible. So when you onboard an employee and you provision them in your human resources platform, that you can automatically provision their unified communications capabilities. And this is where it gets really tricky. Again, if you're in that mixed environment, whether it's multi-vendor on-prem, hybrid, or you're using multiple different applications. Maybe you have a phone system separate from your meeting application. And then lastly, performance, making sure that things work. And again, hopefully being proactive and understanding and identifying issues before they impact users, so that if there is an outage of some kind or network issue, that you can identify that and address it before you start getting angry users who are struggling to make a call.
Yeah, and to answer those 4 requirements, there are, from my point of view, 2 very important solutions. The first one is the monitoring assurance solution, and the second one is the provisioning solution. At Kurmi, we really decided to focus on the second one, the provisioning solution, to be sure to deliver the best-in-class solution. I believe that the monitoring assurance from a technology standpoint is really different. It's real-time, it's all about notification and alarms, and data that you need is completely different. When we have a look to provisioning, it's more about workflow, the data is not the same, etc. That's why I believe it's really important to have 2 dedicated tools to answer the job, and the job is well done. So one tool, one solution for the assurance, another tool, another solution for the provisioning. This is really my point of view in order to answer to those 4 requirements.
Excellent. All right. So what we have found as companies have kind of entered this new space of often having a hybrid approach, having a mixed approach, often adopting cloud-based communications, both for calling as well as even for meetings and messaging. It's changed the way that people are addressing their management strategies. Maybe not enough, but it has certainly changed. For people to think a little bit more proactively and address, as Bruno just mentioned, both that performance and administrative standpoint. So we found about 30% of companies that had invested in new tools to support a migration to cloud. About 21% had gone into, had said, maybe we don't need to have our own tools. We can just rely on the cloud provider. Often we find that is a short-term approach, that they find at some point that the cloud provider tools do not deliver everything they need, and then they need to go and invest in a dedicated third party afterwards. About 44% still comfortable with what they have. But again, our stress point here is that this should be a continual process. It's not, hey, we're going to move to a new platform and here's our one-time decision on management, but it's a constant reevaluation of deciding, do we need to, is there visibility that we don't have? Are there optimizations and automations that we don't have that we can achieve by investing in the right tools? You can see a breakdown by size on the right. Larger companies more likely to invest in new management tools to support their changing environment. Smaller companies a little bit less. So again, I think the key takeaway here is that as your communication strategy evolves, so too must your management strategy. If you're moving to a cloud service, if you're getting new features, if you're changing the mix of endpoints, you need to think about how your management strategy will evolve as you go along. So we find a big effort in integration of IT service management and UCaaS. So for companies that are moving to cloud, this should be just overall UC management. And here the goal is, as I mentioned earlier, if somebody calls a help desk or chats with a help desk agent in today's world, that agent should have everything they need. The first line support person in your help desk should have everything they need at their fingertips. They should be able to see what is, how a person is configured, what their utilization is. Have they had lockouts for trying to log in over a period of time? Did they try and change their password 6 times? All that kind of information that would be useful to that frontline help desk worker to more effectively address the challenge, and again, hopefully make for a happier employee. And here's a really strong success correlation. I mentioned in our study of about 400 companies, we defined about 70 that had the highest ROI, meaning they had reduced operating costs, they had increased revenue through the use of new collaboration applications, or they'd improved employee productivity. You can see overall, only about 24% of companies that have integrated IT service management and UC administration management or UC management. But among the success group, it's almost a little over 72%. So that's one of the larger correlations we saw in that data set that says that you really should be thinking about if you're picking a management solution, how that management solution integrates into your overall IT management strategy.
Yeah, and what we've seen at Kermi is that definitely ServiceNow is the ITSM platform the most used by our customers. And thanks to the API provided by our solution, we have deployed really great automation between ServiceNow and UC and CC solution. Of course, thanks to the API, we are also compliant with other ITSM systems, but ServiceNow is the first one that we are seeing on the market.
Excellent. And we said in the title that we would share with you the value of UC management. I think this is one that really jumps out at us in our data as we start to go through this. So this is the average provisioning time that people are spending to set up a phone number, to establish a video account. You can see it's a pretty wide mix. A very small percentage that are able to provision in less than 5 minutes. The majority are up to 15 minutes to provision either voice or video accounts. So this is an area where if you can optimize through the use of administration tool, optimize this, you can potentially save an awful lot of money and maybe even reduce errors. And again, going back to that, how do we make our employees happier by removing the barriers to them getting their work done?
Yeah, and the feedback, sorry, and the feedback from your survey, I love that administrative management tools reduce provisioning by an average of 33%. I believe if you can have the relevant flexibility of configuration of your management solution, you can have up to an 80% of reduction. This is what we have seen with our customers. To make it happen, I believe flexibility is really important. The ability to customize the management solution in order to have great automation that fits each customer context and so provide real automation and so may reach this 80% of reduction.
Yeah, that's impressive. Like you said, our baseline data just for all providers has been around 30% reduction in time. But if you can hit 80, dropping that 10-minute provisioning time down to 2, that certainly frees up a lot of resources and reduces operating costs.
Oh, yes.
So when we asked participants who are investing in administration management tools, what was the primary value that you're receiving from those tools? Being able to figure out misconfigurations was and proactive notification. If I try and provision something and it doesn't work, I get notified of that before it impacts the end user. That's really the biggest area, but also a variety of other features that a vendor like Kermi brings to the table, allowing people to control their own features, their own passwords, through a self-service portal, automation we talked about earlier as part of an onboarding process, being able to understand, where you might run into issues. Do you have enough phone numbers to support a location, or have you exhausted your pool and you need to buy additional numbers? Being able to know what you've got out there and how it's provisioned, provisioning based on role and policy. Making sure that if you do speed provisioning, you get people up and running more quickly, that hopefully they're using the applications a little more effectively. And their first impression was that, hey, this was a 2-minute setup versus a 10-minute setup, and away I go. And then also measuring some of the business value. We're seeing a lot of interest in people understanding, how are these applications being used and what business value is delivered. So if I implemented, as we talked about our success criteria earlier, if I implemented, say the Kermi platform to speed provisioning, and that reduced by 80%, well, that potentially reduces my overall staffing and support costs, because I've reduced 80% of the time that people were spending simply just provisioning new accounts. So I'll go a little bit more deeply into the data that we've gathered around business benefits and success. And we just recently completed a new study called Workplace Collaboration MetriCast. We went out to about 930 companies. Again, this was North America, Western Europe, Southeast Asia, specifically Singapore and Japan and Australia. And we wanted to, again, we're talking to people who have responsibility for either procuring or operating, or in some cases both, their unified communications environment. And we wanted to understand, are they correlating or seeing any measurable value from the use of administration management tools like Kermi? And so we found that the way, again, here we defined our success group across a couple of different criteria. In order to be considered a successful company, they had to have achieved above average gains in terms of increasing revenue associated with their use of the tools. So they were able to get people up and running more quickly. They reduced downtime. And that resulted in more effective, often this would be external communications. They reduced operating costs, typically, again, staffing time that was required for provisioning. And then we also looked at provisioning time reduction. So we asked the participants if they had measured any of this. And if they did, then we looked at who was above average in their measurements, and we ended up with about 20% of our overall pool of 935 companies that qualified as successful. So roughly about 180. And so this was this was the group that again that achieved that overall benefit. And then in this study, we also looked more deeply into what the metrics were that they had achieved. So here, this chart's a little hard to read, so let me kind of walk you through it. Among the overall pool of participants, we noted that about 37% said that revenue had improved about 24 by an average of 24%. Only about 7% said made worse. Usually that's because they weren't real good at implementing the tools that they had. They ran into issues. It ended up costing more time to implement. And about 39%, almost 40%, that had no change. On the cost side, about 34% saw a reduction in cost by an average of 22.6. About 10% that saw a slight rise in cost. That's usually going to be a first-year cost associated with the investment and deployment of the tools, and about 41% that didn't measure a change. Now, when I say that those who didn't see a change, they may be ones who they don't do this measurement versus they did the measurement and didn't see a change. So I want to call that out. And then on the provisioning time, about 41% saw an overall reduction of about 32% in provisioning time as a result of using an administration management tool. About 7% that saw an increase. Again, typically that would be, and those negative numbers should be, negative signs should be on the top. Or reversed, I should say. So about 7% that saw an increase. Again, that's usually associated with challenges in the deployment. When you look at the success group, they did a little bit better overall mean change. This is an average of whether it improved or made worse. It was about 21%, about 17% overall reduction in costs, and about 27% reduction in provisioning time. So, again, overall group, not quite at that 80% number that Bruno mentioned earlier, but, certainly seeing measurable benefits for their use of an administration management tool. And then we looked at correlation of these results with the specific vendors that they were using. And as I mentioned, we had an overall success group of about 19%, 19.9% of this overall 930 companies that were in our success group, meaning they had the highest cost savings, revenue increase, provisioning time increase or reduction, I should say. And then we correlated that based on the vendors. And the vendors ranged from having 10% of their customers in the success group to having 32.2% of their customers in the success group. Kermi customers were that 32.2%. So among all of the folks who we had in our success group, and then correlating it by the vendor that they were using, Kermi had the overall highest representation of its customer base in the success group. So almost a third of Kermi customers had measured above average gains in reduction in provisioning time, cost savings, or revenue increase. So congratulations to Kermi on that.
Thanks, Erin. We are very proud of this result, and it underlines our ability to really meet new challenges of companies that want to easily address their hybrid and multi-vendor infrastructure issues. Our agile platform has been rewarded by Metrigy and is a finalist for the best management platform also for UC Award 2022. So finger crossed. And just also we are part, as I said during the introduction, of the Cisco Solution Plus program. That's also something important for us, and the Gold program of Microsoft. And we are working also very hard with Microsoft in order with our next release to be fully compliant with Microsoft Graph API in order to keep those good results.
Excellent. All right. So just wrapping up with some conclusions and recommendations. Again, I think the key takeaway here is I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone responsible for UC management, but the landscape has drastically changed. People are working remotely, they're hybrid, sometimes in the office, sometimes at home, or in some cases now back to the office full time. It often, as we talked about earlier, depends on their role. Lots more devices, lots more applications. It's not a monolithic environment for most organizations where they have a single vendor for everything. And there's a greater need to enable integrated management so that the people who have responsibility for ensuring that these applications work are not themselves having to move back and forth between different platforms in order to respond or hopefully predict problems before they occur. Second, key takeaway from our research is that the platforms deliver measurable business value. You can achieve a reduction in provisioning time. You can improve self-service. You can make employees happier because the applications are working as intended, and they can, hopefully support themselves to a certain extent. And then faster mean time to repair from integration with IT service management and the use of these tools. So, we talked about the overall reduction in provisioning time, the cost savings, the revenue benefits. So, and then lastly, again, just to reinforce that among our success group, the overall 19.9% of companies that we consider to be successful, Kermi was the most highly represented in that among their customers. So 32% of customers that had highest that were in our success group, so higher than any of the other vendors in the space. And with that, I know Bruno, you've got a couple of closing comments.
Yes, for sure, because in order to follow your recommendations, so it's really important for you to select a unified communication management solution. So with my own word, why do you need that? Of course, already explained you that, but with my own word, it's really about saving time, really reduce the time to provision users from hours to minutes or seconds. And so thanks to that, you will decrease drastically your cost. As I said previously, you can reduce your cost by up to 80%. And in parallel of these gains, this value, you will also reduce errors because we will automate changes, so you will avoid human errors. And at the end of the day, that will also improve the service. You will offload a time-consuming task for your help desk team and provide the relevant service, the relevant feature to the relevant users in a matter of seconds. So that's really why you should need a unified communication management solution. And so this is what we deliver: simplify, automate, delegate, and migrate UC provisioning, migration, and day-to-day administration. We have several capabilities: unified provisioning, really for day-to-day management, the self-service portal that will also provide the end user the ability for the end user to do some stuff by himself, maybe resetting the password, enabling or disabling voicemail, etc. And of course, the migration capability is super important. If you are migrating from on-prem to cloud, from a technology to another technology, or just because you have several locations, maybe using several technologies, and when you want to move a user from a place, from a location to another location, that's a kind also of migration, and we can take care of that. That's really important, and you will be able to make this migration at your own pace, thanks to the features. So to make it simple, we really simplify multiple UC workflows and processes. So at the top, as you may see, we've got our northbound API. As I said, ServiceNow is maybe the first one that we are integrated with, but we are also compliant with other ITSM systems thanks to our northbound API. To the southbound, of course, is what we call our connectors. This is really from our DNA to get these multi-vendor capabilities with Cisco, Avaya, Microsoft, but also we are working on Zoom, and we've got Alcatel capabilities, partnership also with what I like to call third-party vendors like Imagical. So ready to take care and to provide a single pane of glass for all those vendors. And then our solution will be used by, on the left, the IT admin and the end user to really automate, simplify the way to manage your UC and CC solution, whatever the technology, on-prem and or cloud. Okay, so a single unified interface to manage your entire UC stack, super important. That's it. Thank you for joining. I don't know if there are any questions.
Yep, I was just going to say that. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you to both of you for speaking in the webinar today. We'll move to Q&A. Reminder for our attendees that you can submit a question from the questions tab at the bottom of your screen. And we have our first one, which is, you mentioned that UC management tools can generate a reduction in provisioning time and day-to-day management time. What would be the average cost savings? Did we cover that?
Yeah, I think we mentioned it briefly that we were seeing in terms of it was more of a time savings versus a cost savings. So we talked about, I think the average that we saw in our research was around 30%. Bruno mentioned up to 80% that he's seen from Kermi customers. So when you look at calculating a cost benefit there, what we would typically do is look at the overall time or overall cost of staffing related to the UC platform. So in our data, typically it's about, depending on the vendor, anywhere from about $600 to $1,400 per year per license in terms of staffing. So that's the staffing required for provisioning, managing, and so on. So if you can reduce, the provisioning part of that by 80%, that could be some very significant savings.
Terrific. And our next question, how complex are customers finding the migration from an on-prem solution to the cloud, and how can Kermi help with that?
So I will take that one. Good questions, not easy to answer. That it depends. It depends because first it depends if you are migrating from on-prem to cloud, keeping the same technology, and so you may find the same feature set, the same way to configure it. So in that case, it could be quite easy, and or you can also migrate from a techno vendor and switch to another one, and in that case, it could be really different. But there is another context. It depends also of your strategy, because what we've seen is that some customers decided to say, I want to try to keep exactly the same configuration. So I would like to copy paste what was on-prem when I will perform my migration. I've seen other customers, and this is what I prefer, to be honest, saying that, okay, it's for me an opportunity to start with a new clean system. It's exactly the same if you purchase a new laptop, you won't never take your old hard drive with the old data software that you are not using anymore to your new laptop. It's an opportunity when you get your new laptop in order to maybe install only the relevant software with the latest, of course, release, and to copy paste on only the most important folder of files. And this is what I will recommend. In any case, whatever your strategy, with Kermi, we can really help on that migration. And our choice is really to put first the user in place. So really to take care about the migration of the user. And then thanks to our flexibility and customization capability, we will be able to adapt our product to your strategy, depending on what you want to do.
Terrific. Here's one more. Since the pandemic, the adoption of unified communications solutions has skyrocketed. What are trends you're seeing in terms of multiple technologies coexisting in these UC environments?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. Certainly seeing a lot of multi-vendor environments. So the last data we published showed about 48% of companies that had more than one video conferencing application. We see, as we talked about earlier, a transition, especially in larger companies who may still have some on-prem platforms in different parts of the company that need to be maintained for a variety of reasons, whether it's regulatory or cost or features or so on. So I think, again, if you go back, 5-7 years ago, pre-pandemic and even a little bit further, it was much more common to find companies that, were a Cisco shop or an Avaya shop or, more recently a Microsoft shop. Now we tend to see much more of a mix, especially as you bring contact center into the mix. So, maybe you have a Cisco call platform with a third-party contact center provider that you need to handle integration. So I think overall the trend has been more toward a diverse set of applications versus a monolithic type approach.
Great. Here's one more. With hybrid work on the rise, how important is security, and how is it managed by UC vendors and by Kermi?
Interesting. I would like to say that for UC vendors, first, maybe they will because security is super important, they will really focus about the security of the network, encryption, etc., and go up to training also employees. But there is also something super important regarding security, is the compliancy of the data. You have to be sure that you are providing the relevant feature to the relevant user, and that you will grant the relevant access to the relevant user. And for that, Kermi really provide what we call compliancy capability checking, that making a easy use case. Have an example that maybe John Smith is a basic user with the right to make only national call. And maybe someone made a change in the UC system without using Kermi and switch from national to international. And so that could be a security issue. And thanks to Kermi, we are able to detect that change and saying, hey, this is not compliant with the business rule, with the security rules of the company, because that company said for basic user, it must be only national calling rights. And now we have detected it's international, so we can detect and we can, of course, change the configuration to be the relevant one. And so from a security perspective, it's super important to get a tool like Kermi that will guarantee your data are compliant.
Terrific. Okay, we have time for one more. You've mentioned the benefits of integration with ITSM platforms. How does this get implemented?
You want to take that, Bruno, or?
Yep, I can for sure. So yeah, the integration is really important. Is done through the API that we provide. So coming back on the ServiceNow ITSM system. So in ServiceNow, you have the ability, of course, it's really flexible, ServiceNow, and you have the ability to say, okay, when we want to create a new user using ServiceNow, you can request API. So the configuration will be done in ServiceNow, and ServiceNow will request our API. And then we will receive this request saying, hey, we need a new user, John Smith, based in New York and is a sales guy. And that's it. So super easy from the perspective of ServiceNow. And then Kermi will have all the intelligence saying, all right, he's based in New York, so I need to create a Microsoft Teams account. It will also have WebEx capabilities, and because he's in New York, I will provide him this kind of phone number, etc., etc. So we will have all the intelligence then us to connect to all the different systems and make all the technical configuration. So for the ITSM, let's say admin guy that will say, oh, I would like to have something easy to use in ServiceNow, we will take care of the complexity.
Terrific. Well, that is all the time we have right now. Thank you, Erwin and Bruno, and thanks to our audience for attending. A link to a replay of the webinar will be shared with everyone over email in the coming days, and it will also be available via the Kermi website at kermi-software.com. If you found this webinar useful, please do share it with your colleagues. And we thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.